Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today's guest is Jason Hennessy, Air Force alum turned SEO agency founder, who in his second agency, Hennessy Digital, went from a lifestyle shop into a category leader. He sold to Trinity Hunt, a private equity firm based out of Dallas, Texas, in a newly formed platform called Herringbone Digital. He's a rare founder and entrepreneur who pairs discipline, generosity. He built systems, culture, and seeked outside mentorship to grow and get to this next phase of entrepreneurial journey. He focused on his clients, team, and family. And now he's helping build a 100 million plus in revenue platform and helping teach founders how he scaled without losing what matters most. Let's dive in. Jason, thank you for joining me.
Peter, glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Now, you got to announce an epic event this year. And you've done what many agency owners hope for, which is selling and staying on and growing something bigger. But before you got to this big life-changing event, this transformation, you started out as an entrepreneur. Can you take us back just to get us up to speed of that journey?
Yeah, that journey starts, I guess, when I'm like 7 years old, setting up lemonade stands. You know what I mean? Like I was always kind of wired, I guess, to be an entrepreneur, nature nurture, I guess. And then throughout high school, I was the kid walking around school with a backpack full of blow pops and selling gum and, all that kind of stuff. Right. And so, fast forward, I found the world of SEO in 2001, became a student of it, started as a need, turned into a passion, turned into an obsession, right? And then just figured out a way to take my passion and make a living with it, right? And so that was fun. I learned a lot over the years. I built up one agency, ended up selling that one to my business partner. And then in 2015, I started this agency. It was originally called Hennessy Consulting because that's all it was. It was Jason Hennessy doing some consulting. And then eventually it became Hennessy Digital and we hired people and grew. So fast forward to 2025, I sold it to private equity. And I am staying on. I rolled over, and we could certainly talk about that more too.
Great.
Mm.
Take us back to the first agency you started.
Yeah.
What was that like? What did that look like day to day?
So that one started on accident, truthfully. I was doing SEO on some of my own personal properties. I was also doing SEO for a couple of online poker websites, which is a very competitive vertical. And so a friend of mine, his name is Brad Fallon, he started a company called StomperNet, which was like one of the early educational platforms where people can learn about SEO. I just moved to Atlanta. I was partnering with Brad on a different venture. And he said, hey, by the way, I just got invited to go speak to a group of DUI lawyers. It's a mastermind. He says, I know a lot about SEO, but I think you kind of are more current. And would you mind if I brought you with me? I could introduce you and then you kind of do a presentation. And so I'm like, what? What do you want me to do? When is this? Tomorrow? Like, I know nothing about lawyers. I know nothing about legal marketing. He's like, it'll be easy. And I'm like, okay. And so I put together a presentation. We went there the next day. I got up on stage. I gave about a 45-minute presentation, full transparency, how I was able to rank on Google for keywords that had nothing to do with lawyer marketing at all, but just kind of showing them how to do it. And when I got off stage, I had probably like 6 or 7 lawyers that came up to me and said, that was awesome. Like I'm paying an SEO company like $5,000 per month. They're not doing any of this stuff. Do you do this, from a consulting perspective? And so I said, well, not really, but give me your card and we can be in touch. And so I ended up leaving there with like 7 business cards, which then turned into like $30,000 in recurring revenue. And so next thing you know, I'm working with lawyers and I'm in the legal industry. And so we called that, we didn't even have a name for that agency. You know what I mean? It was just like, all right, we're in the agency now. And so I had a friend of mine that partnered with me on that, actually 2 friends. And then we built that up for, maybe like 7 years. So that was 2008. I ended up selling that in 2015. And so, like at the point we were just like every other average SEO company for lawyers. We were charging like $3,500, $5,000 per month, whatever. We got okay results. but we had two partners with two different appetites for growth. And so it just made sense and it was amicable. And he ended up buying my interest. And so we moved to California and I took a sabbatical leave, played a lot of tennis. And I'm like, my wife is like, I think you should probably go do something again, like you're home a lot. And so I'm like, okay. And I remember sitting in like a coffee shop in Toluca Lake and I'm like, how am I going to get my first new client? And so I did. And then this is now called Hennessy, again, Hennessy Digital now. But I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this again, I don't want to be the $3,000 per month SEO agency. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that I have the proper budget. I want to be the Lamborghini of the industry. And so if I'm going to be the Lamborghini of the industry, I need to charge Lamborghini prices because that'll give me more firepower to get better results. And so the first client that I got was, I just said, hey, it's 15 grand a month. I didn't think they would say yes, and they did. And so that was my first client. I made that an amazing case study. That client is still a client of mine today, 10 years later. And then from there, I got my next client at 12 grand, and so we just kind of set ourselves up as kind of like the higher tier agency for law firms.
Yeah, I can, that's a very relatable story.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah, like the accidental entrepreneur, opportunistic, you started servicing people who asked you for help. Is there anything from that first business and the transaction with your business partner that you think informed the deal you just did or lessons learned from it?
Yeah, I think, well, for them, I think the biggest one is, maybe reconsider always bringing in new business partners too, because, whenever there was like a new idea or a new strategy or budgeting or whatever else, like you have to, even if you have to go to the bank or something, you got to get two people to sign things, so I just kind of took it. I'm like, you know what, if I'm going to do this again, I want like more control. And so that was definitely a lesson, and so Hennessy was basically my baby. And so I didn't have any business partners per se. But also, a lot of the strategies that I learned and, another thing was that agency was in like a beautiful building. Like it was in the middle of Sandy Springs in this building called the King and Queen building. So, we had a lot of overhead that was probably unnecessary. We also recruited people from a 5-mile radius of that building. You know what I mean? And so I knew that when I was going to start my next agency, I didn't want all the overhead and I didn't want to limit myself from a pool of talent that has to drive back and forth to an office that's in an area that, I'd rather be able to recruit talent from all over the world. And so I just knew that if I was going to do this again, it was going to be a remote first agency well before COVID, forced a lot of agencies to be that way.
So some of the lessons were remote,
Mm-hmm.
full control
Yeah.
of decision-making and governance,
Mm-hmm.
and then moved up the value chain. You're going to charge more for the value you can create for your clients.
There you go.
And then in the early days, how quickly did you scale? Like, what did it look like as you started getting these larger contracts?
Yeah. So that's actually cool too. Like, because I had just like exited, I guess, my first, it wasn't by any means like life-changing exit, you know what I mean? But I was kind of complacent financially. If I didn't want to work for a little bit, I had that luxury of not. And so, whereas when I started my first agency, you just kind of have to say yes to anybody that will give you money. You know what I mean? Like, because you're trying to grow and you've got to feed a family and stuff like that. So I think I was in a good position that I'm going to ask for a higher dollar amount. That if they said no, I was like, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I'll find the next person that will say yes. Right. And so, try to eliminate like the desperation, I guess. Right. And I get it. Like, when you're just starting a business, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you have to kind of learn that because you're not in a position where you can kind of just say no to people. And I think that ended up hurting our agency, the first agency, because just because somebody had a $5,000 budget, we would accept it.
Yeah.
And then you have to like manage expectations and maybe you don't have the power that's necessary to get the results that they're looking for. And, as a result of that, maybe your agency reputation kind of suffers a little bit too, right? So I didn't want that. And so I'd like to say that now Hennessy Digital, we're by no means perfect. We've lost clients, we've gained clients, but at the end of the day, like I've never screwed anybody over. I can go to conferences. I could have beers with people that were former clients. We even have former clients that leave us that then come back to us. We call those boomerangs. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I take my personal reputation very seriously. In terms of like, how did we scale, to kind of go back to your question? It There wasn't a strategy per se. You know what I mean? It was just like, okay, great. I'm laser focused. I'm working on this one client. I want this one client to be an amazing case study. And then after it was a good case study, then, I might reach out to that client and say, by the way, I'm looking for another client. Do you have anybody that might be a good fit? And they might make an introduction. Right. And then
Yep.
from there, similar, then they go to like a mastermind and they're like, oh yeah, I'm working with Jason, and who's Jason? You should give him a call, right? Next, I got 2 more clients, right? And it just started to grow organically. I never really ran pay-per-click ads or anything. We were kind of like a speakeasy, if you will. And then grew it to about pretty quickly in about 3 years, maybe like to about 4 million in top line revenue. And then I wrote a large check to the government, and I'm like, why did I work so hard? I made a lot of money, but I also showed a lot of profit. And so I would have much rather defer that and put it into people that can help me grow, and I could buy back some of my time. And so that was a wake up call where I kind of shifted from lifestyle business to, something that is more scalable and maybe sellable, I guess, in the future.
Yeah. We had talked in the prep call around your interactions with mentors
Mm.
and the folks who maybe gave you feedback on the business and how to approach it. When did you transition from the client delivery, the focus, the incremental to, okay, this is something more substantial now. I'm
Mm.
going to bring this business, this new venture to mentors and get their take on where we should go.
Yeah. So soon as we hit about like 5 million in revenue, that's when I brought in a business coach. That's when I brought in a executive assistant. And shortly before that, when we were closer to like 4 million, I'd brought in a COO and a CFO who then introduced me to a CTO. And it was great. I got like a 3-for-1 package because they all worked together and they had already brought another company to exit. So I kind of won the lottery there, right? That just is not, that doesn't happen.
That's lucky, Jason. That's wonderful.
Ain't that amazing? Like they had all worked together for like 10 years, right? And they had already brought another company to exit. And so I had like an executive team that knew exactly what it takes. They'd already been through diligence. They already know what it looks like looking backwards. And so they helped me to kind of build out the blueprint to scale it. And so we did. And so, but that was definitely a blessing. And then the coach came in and he would meet with me and my COO, and we meet once a month and we would jump on a call for like 90 minutes. And he would hold us accountable, because a lot of times, there's nobody ever really holding the CEO accountable. Right. He would also be able to kind of work with me and my COO, making sure that we're all kind of properly communicating together, putting me in check, and then he also, gave us great feedback, whether or not it's like, here's why you shouldn't do this. And it was all based on his experience. It wasn't just like, a thought or a suggestion. It was like, in my experience, he had built up 1-800 Got Junk as the COO. And so he knows what it takes to build a company from 10 million to 200 million. And then he made suggestions like, he goes, do you have an executive assistant? I'm like, no. He goes, okay, you are the executive assistant. That's your first task. Go get an executive assistant. He said, I also think you probably should consider writing a book. You need to be a thought leader in your space. Right. And so he introduced me to his publisher. And so like little things like that, you can't just buy that kind of stuff. And so I was very grateful. And he's still our business coach many years later after the exit.
Yeah. Cameron Harold is who we're referring to. And he wrote a book, Vivid Vision, and has been a great resource for multiple books. I think his other one's what? Meetings Suck is in there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Vivid Vision was one of the first things he made me do. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, great. Where are you going? I'm like, I don't know. Like wherever we went, we ended up. Right. And so he's like, dude, that doesn't work like that. He goes, you have to have a clear vision of where you want to be. in the next 3 years. And so we went through this whole exercise. I went to a fancy hotel in Beverly Hills. I stayed there overnight. I'd be sitting by the pool by myself, just kind of collecting my thoughts. And then whatever I envision what the company is going to look like in 3 years, I just wrote a little bullet, wrote another little bullet, right? And then from there, I had all these bullets. I went back. I gave it to our copywriter. She then took those bullets and turned it into a story. After we had the story, then we brought that to our creative team who actually put together like all the visuals to kind of go with the story. And then we published it on our website. And so that became the vision, And so even if you only hit 20% of the vision, like it's better than not having a vision and not hitting anything. So
Yeah. And then he's a great facilitator between you, the vision, and your operating team, right? And
exactly.
helping to manifest that vision and operationalize it.
Mhm.
Do you think that was a turning point for you in the business, or were you already making that turn for professionalizing the business and the next phase, which, I mean, that vision is what the private equity firm loves about the business.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think we would have had clear direction on where we were going if we were just kind of just still status quo of just waking up and just doing things, like just doing more things, doing more things. Because what happens is entrepreneurs can become a danger to themselves. What do I mean? Well, entrepreneurs have the tendencies to have great ideas. And so some of those great ideas are applicable to their business, and other great ideas are new businesses, right? And so I've known many entrepreneurs that are friends of mine that started a business, and next thing you know, they got 5 different businesses, right? And so this business is doing okay, this one's doing a little bit better, right? But all their attention is kind of being spread over the course of 5 different businesses, right? And so I always like to say, like, a good CEO needs a second in command, a good COO that will be their no person, to kind of keep them in check, keep them in line, and tells them like, "Hey, that's a great idea, Jason. Just not right now. Let's put that one to the side, right? So you don't hurt anybody's feelings, right? But it also keeps you in check because, every time you have a new idea, even if it's for your business, like that idea might need a budget. It might need resources, right? And so if we have like a clear vision of where we want to be in 3 years, well, let's work backwards. Okay, great. This year we're going to focus on this. We're going to build this. Boom, right? And then you continue to put the systems and processes in place and have all the leaders kind of basically managing their specific roles on kind of building the greater vision of the company. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you shared with me that when you brought in that C-suite, that you doubled in revenue.
We did that 1 year. Yeah.
That's an aha. That's important to double tap, Jason. So
Mm.
speak directly to the founder who's yet to make that investment in high caliber C-suite and leadership and what that unlock looks like.
Yeah. So you don't realize it, right? When you just kind of like in your everyday, waking up and just kind of doing a little bit more, doing a little bit more. Like a lot of times, like CEOs kind of feel like nobody else can do it better, right? And you start to get into that mentality, or the opposite. Like sometimes you feel like you can't really afford to hire, more competent help. And I was kind of in that situation too. Like, truthfully, when I hired my COO and my CFO, I probably wasn't in a position, you know what I mean, to kind of bring on such seasoned talent. But I took a chance, I took a risk. It was a calculated risk and it benefited me, right? And so like the COO came in, Scott, and he's like, I'm just gonna listen for the next 3 months. I'm not gonna speak, I'm just gonna absorb, right? And he would just get on calls and you'd see how things work, right? 3 months later, he's like, okay, great. Now that I understand the business, this is some of the suggestions I'm going to make, boom, the books are a mess. We need a CFO, right? I mean, if we got audited today, there's probably, like issues there, right? You've got contractors that might, all that kind of stuff, right? From an operations perspective, and he just kept giving, it's like point after point. It's like, okay, great. And then he helped me to go out to kind of fix a lot of those issues and put better systems and processes in place or hire the right people. And then when the CFO came in, she came in and she just kind of created a way better system I was doing billing, I was doing payroll, just like a mess. And then from there, then we started, then growing from 5 million. Like I said, we went from 4 million to like 8 million that
Wow.
year, right?
Quick, just give us you didn't just grow revenue, you also grew in team,
We
presumably.
did. Yes.
So give us the before and after in that year.
Yeah, so that was a year that we really started to grow our human resources, whether it was developers or whether it was account managers or a director of client services, right? Because I was kind of an account manager. I was the SEO strategist. I mean, I was kind of doing everything, right? Except write content and do all the technical stuff because I had engineers that would do that. And so we just started to kind of grow. And while we are making more money, right? So the top line's growing. We also brought in 2 sales guys too. That definitely helped,
That
right?
helps.
For
Yeah.
sure. And I trained the sales guys. They were part of my past life, I guess. One was a guy that I had rented out my home 15 years prior to, right? Who was a sales guy.
He didn't go far.
Yeah, he was a sales guy, worked in timeshares, you know what I mean? So, he's an aggressive salesperson and definitely good, and so he started to learn SEO and I taught him, and then the other guy, Rob, was a client of mine many years ago, and so he saw it from the opposite end, and so he came in and they still work with me today, like 6 years later each. And so again, like I said, like we started to kind of double the revenue, but that doesn't always mean that you double the margin, right?
Yeah.
And so going from 4 million to 8 million again happened pretty quickly. Then we got to 10 million. And I like to say going from 10 million to 20 million was a lot easier than going from 1 to 10
It is. Yeah.
because then you start to bring in, it gets expensive though, right? Because now you have like a C-suite, but then you also have to bring in like mid-level managers, right? And so a lot of that stuff doesn't go to the bottom line, right? Because those are costs that you're incurring. And so there was a point where our margins were like down to like just 7%.
Yep.
So even though that we're making $15 million a year, right, at a 7% margin, that's not sustainable, but I knew that I was making these investments for the future growth of the company, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually you continue to grow, sales grow, and you can find a way to kind of get the margins back up to a 20 to 25% range, maybe 30. And then from there, now you have a good business and you have replaced yourself in every aspect of the business. That's what I did. I replaced myself in every aspect of the business so I can focus on being like the face of the company and doing podcasts and speaking and writing books and all that kind of stuff, which I think is more of my superpower.
We're going to get into what that superpower enabled in your transaction here shortly. I just want to bookend this chapter with how many years did it take to professionalize the business? And then in hindsight, could you have done it faster?
So let's see, here's 2020, 21, I'd say is when we started to kind of professionalize the business. And we started in 2015, so call it 6 years maybe.
Yeah.
Um, could we have done it faster? I think we were kind of right on time with that because, we definitely had capital constraints. Like you have to kind of get past the capital constraints, right? And when you're in the bootstrap mode, you have to trade dollars with time. And so that's what I was doing, right? In the absence of not having a lot of dollars at the time, like I was just like working a lot. And so I think I was addicted to my business for sure. So I think if you're in like the 5-year mark of your agency and you're now at 5-6 million dollars in top line, then you might want to start to consider, okay, now take it from lifestyle to scaling, I guess, really kind of trying to build an enterprise, an asset, I guess, that you might be able to sell.
How was your family dynamic and during the startup phase and as you were growing? Because I want to relate it to what you're doing now, but I would love to know, like, were you because you sound like an SEO nerd.
Yes.
You love it. You're a practitioner. You enjoy the content itself and the impact.
Hmm.
So what did the family dynamic look like? Because you have a beautiful family, supportive.
Yeah.
Was it stressful for dad during that time, or what did it look like?
Yes and no. I think it was more stressful when my boys were younger, right? Because I was a young entrepreneur just trying to figure everything out, like college, and I just got out of the Air Force and just recently married, and right, and so you have all of those dynamics. So I think it was a lot more stressful when I was up and coming as a early stage entrepreneur. But I think as of lately, I guess while building Hennessy Digital, I think my wife knew she married an entrepreneur, right? Right from the start. And so she kind of knew that was in my DNA. Was it stressful? Absolutely. Like we would go to vacation, and I'd be in the middle of Bahamas, right? And we'd be at dinner and I might have to like go downstairs to the room to take a call, right? Or, you get a text message and you're kind of stressed out now about something, right? So yeah, there was all of that, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that are kind of still at that stage of their business now where you're kind of like married to your wife, but you're also married to your business too. And you kind of have to juggle those two relationships. And so, yeah, that definitely, caused stress. But I think I handled it well. Still married 27 years, you know what I mean? Like, so we got past that. And so, but nowadays it's just different stresses, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's get into what changed the stress input.
Yeah.
The deal you weren't ready to do, but you were actually well prepared for. How did it manifest?
Yeah. So when I say we, me, my COO and my CFO, we looked at where we were as a business. We said, why don't we focus on bringing the profitability, the EBITDA in 2024. Let's try to get that as close to like 5 million as possible. 2025, we'll try to get it close to like 7.58. 2026, let's try to bring it north of 10 million. And then come January 2027, that's when we maybe go and look at an investment banker and then maybe looking at potentially exiting, right? After we had about 10 million in EBITDA. And so that was the goal. But during that time period, because selling the business is a strategy, right? Like we knew it was going to be a 3-year strategy for us. During that time period, you start to take the meetings, right? Because you just want to like see what's out there. You want to start building relationships. We met with other potential buyers that wasn't going to be the best fit. And so for me, I like to say that if I'm going to do a deal, as the entrepreneur and the founder of the company, you have to know like, what do you want? What do you want for the deal? But what do you want after the deal too, right? Because there's different theses, there's different buyers. And so I knew that I'm 47 years old. I love my business. It's still my baby. Like, I don't want to just exit and sunset and just go live on an island. Like, I'd love to kind of see if I could stick around and continue to grow something. And so we met with a couple potential buyers. For the reason they weren't the best fit. And then a colleague of mine introduced us. We didn't even hire an investment banker or anything either, right? Because we weren't really at that stage. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
You're informally, and I always recommend that people understand the buyers and who's available to them at their various states of size.
Hmm.
So you got it in. You're doing this all informally.
Yeah.
Was there any data room sharing, just to give context to it?
Not yet, right? I mean, it was just because we weren't necessarily for sale yet, right? We were just looking at taking some meetings just to I remember we took a meeting, right? I remember I got on a call with my coaching client. This was even before. This is like maybe when we're like 8 million, right? And there was a potential buyer that reached out to us and they're very serious. And they said, hey, we'd love to potentially acquire you. You guys got a great reputation. And at the time, we might have had like maybe like $700,000 in EBITDA. You know what I mean? And so they would be stealing us, right? If they were to buy us, right? And so I remember going to my business coach, right, who gave us wisdom. He goes, I said, we have this opportunity, like they might want to buy her. He's like, okay, are they serious? I'm like, yeah. He goes, okay, great. I go, all they want us to do is just to send over like these 12 pieces of information. And so he's like, well, don't do that. I'm like, why? He goes, because that begins due diligence and that's going to become a distraction. It's going to become a distraction for you, your CFO, right, Scott? And he goes, look, do you have a number? And I'm like, well, I mean, over the next like 3 years, if we continue to do this and this, we'll probably be at this EBITDA. He goes, okay, so what's your number? I'm just like, I don't know. 75 million. He's like, okay, well, just give him that number, right? And so we kind of went back. We're like, hey, listen, before we do diligence, we know that we're growing. If you want to buy us now, like this is the number. And they're like, ha ha ha, let's continue. Let's revisit this, you know? But I think it was good wisdom and advice. And so, yeah, so like we didn't, again, we didn't have an investment banker. We weren't really there. We're only 8 months into our journey when my friend, a colleague of mine, introduced us to a potential buyer. And so, like I said, you take the call, right? It's not a bad thing to do. And then, you know, we just started to hit it off. They started telling us about their thesis and what they're building, and they're looking to they're looking to invest in founders that want to stay. They want to find like best in class in these 4 different verticals. They had already acquired an agency in the dental space. They're looking for somebody in legal. We have a really good reputation. So they're like, you know, so we kind of went on and like, here, we sent over some preliminary information, and then they came back with some numbers. And so we're like, you know, this looks great. We appreciate it, but we're going to probably, you know, let's pick up the conversation. Maybe another year, we're going to continue down our journey. And they said, okay, well, let us sharpen our pencils a little bit. And then they left and they came back. And so they were able to kind of build a deal that made sense, right? And it checked 3 boxes. It was going to be a good fit for my clients first. It'd be a good fit for my employees second, and it was going to be a great fit for me third, right? So I wanted to check all 3 boxes. Because a lot of times, like when you sell a business, maybe it's amazing, like exit for the owner, but maybe it's going to be a world of mess for clients, right? You know what I mean? My name's on the business, right? I wanted to preserve my reputation. And it was a deal where I can stay on as the CEO, and they were going to give me a board seat into the platform, and I was going to invest into the platform. And so it kind of made sense. And the math, even though like I didn't get the same price that I would have gotten if I waited to the end of 2026 and looked at selling in 2027, I think the way the deal is structured, by the time 2027, 2028 happens, I think it'll actually be richer, right? Yeah. So the math adds up where it actually be a better deal anyway.
So you took this informal official meeting that turned into something formal. When did you get the team around you to take it seriously? So you had the internal team, but when did you get the lawyers? Did you get an investment banker to assist? What did that look like?
Yeah. So the moment that we realized, okay, great, this is more serious, we needed to get counsel. And so we hired an attorney. And so she came in and she started to work on negotiating the LOI, right? And so I belong to a group called YPO. And so there's many of my colleagues in YPO that have already sold to private equity. And so the first thing that I did was I reached out to 6 of my colleagues and I called them up and I said, hey, so-and-so, I know you sold your business to private equity. How did you get screwed over? Right? You know, I called the next person. I know you sold your business to private equity. How did you get screwed over? Right? And so every one of them, you know, gave me just a little bit of tidbits about like, hey, be careful about this, make sure you structure the deal this way, you know. And so that kind of gave me insights into how I wanted to kind of negotiate the LOI, right? So we took probably like 3 months just negotiating the LOI, which in hindsight probably saved me a lot of money later, because otherwise we would have been negotiating all this stuff later in the purchase agreement. And so it was very clear terms, and we kind of met in the middle on a lot of it. And so once the LOI was signed, I signed the LOI on December 20th, and then we ended up closing in May. So, but yeah, I spent a great deal of time. And then we brought along the way, you know, we brought in other advisors too. So we brought in like a merger and acquisition, somebody, you know, that advised on that. We brought in like our CPA that kind of gave us tax advice and things like that. And then we worked very diligently with the whole process of diligence and everybody that they would bring, you know, to the table too.
Right. So the other folks listening to this don't have to ping their YPO members. What was important for you to negotiate into the LOI rather than deferring it to the purchase agreement?
Yeah. So like, you know, things like, okay, like what does salaries look like, you know, for yourself and your executives? You know, is there trying to think of like all of the different points, like our attorneys were working very closely with them. There was something called like an F reorg. I'm not sure you're familiar with that term that, might not have been favorable, for me from a tax perspective that I didn't even know what an F reorg was. And so that was something that we talked about that we structured into the deal, like things like that. I could probably go on, and this was probably like 8 months ago, actually 9 months ago now. So, but there's a lot of little deal points, like look in the agreement under this section, make sure it says this and not that, right? Kind of a thing.
I'll unpack two things that I gathered from that. One is you took the time to take the LOI quite seriously,
Yes.
which allowed you to feel confident hiring, so burdening an expense to negotiate. Because some people go, well, I'll wait to sign an LOI or to negotiate the LOI before bringing on an attorney. All attorneys want you to notify them prior to an LOI. They don't want to show up because you actually, as a seller, have the most control right before you sign that LOI.
You do, right? You have leverage, right?
You have leverage. And so it's your best opportunity to get as clear as possible to the expectations, the treatment for your team, yourself. And it's hard for the buyer sometimes to be that specific prior to due diligence too.
Yeah, other things too, like, one of the things that somebody else told me was, hey, make sure that you kind of put guardrails up for the first year, right? So like, hey, you can't fire anybody, right? And disrupt the culture of the business, like stuff like that. I mean, without cause, obviously if somebody's doing something, just trying to put up a little bit of guardrails there. Also, there's another thing too that I thought was kind of important, but like just little things like that, the other one is, so like, if there's a platform and there's people that actually work at the platform, so that if they come in and they start to help organize things, or, that we're not actually getting invoiced for their time, you know what I mean? Like, so like stuff like that.
Yeah. We have a few episodes on the podcast where folks who've sold the big strategics had the first year earnout negatively intervened, where they took the team, put them on a road show, announced the acquisition, and the first year under new ownership, they don't hit the numbers. And that's right where some of this performance earnout is being triggered and realized.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got great advice. And then the goal of any transaction is to have whatever you agree upon in the LOI, make it all the way to the purchase agreement.
Exactly. Yeah.
And diligence is just a supportive document and evidence that gets you to there for the buyer to feel comfortable. What did you learn about the business? Because now you're in due diligence. Well, actually, before I get there, when you got the LOI and you negotiated it, you were spending time and energy, and you got the version you were ready to execute, sign. How'd you feel? It gets real when you make a decision to sign an LOI.
Yeah, I felt very good, right? Because like, you're starting to learn who you're about to get married to, right? You know what I mean? And so, like, were they open to hearing my point? Were they like full hard stop? That's a no-go for us. Like, I think so I knew kind of like the relationship that I was getting into is a very amicable relationship. Like they would hear my side, I would hear their side. We would meet in the middle. So it's very cordial. And so I felt very good about the partner that I was getting into business with. And so when I ended up signing that, because my business coach would say, hey, be careful, because once you sign the LOI, now they've got you on the roof and they take away the ladder. You know what I mean? And so, but that was never the case with my deal. I'm not saying that that's not the case with other private equity deals, but for me, like, I think I hit the lottery with that too. Like,
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So let's give this some description. Trinity Hunt had bought a business to start this portfolio, to start this platform, but it wasn't in your direct service line. And so they needed you. If they bought you, they needed you to continue to run it because they didn't have any professional management they would install. So they were very incentivized for your success and your future success versus another platform who's already got the management in place, who's absorbing your agency into their system. They also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, how many other agencies had they invested in previously? Only a few, right?
Just one. So we were the second acquisition for this.
in Hennessy, in this Herringbone
And
one.
this, yeah, so they do have another platform. So they did have experience, but it wasn't verticalized. That was the thesis of this one, like dental, legal, home services, and elective medicine. That was very
Yeah.
specific.
What did they say that made you comfortable moving forward with them without getting other offers?
I think the biggest thing is that they appreciated how we have grown the business to date, and they really didn't want to disrupt what we've built, right? They really wanted to just kind of enable and add more fire to it so that we can grow faster and preserve the brand that we've built and the reputation that we built. And so I think if my personal goal was to sell and then like just exit and go and retire, I wouldn't have been the right deal for them. Right. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like a good mutual understanding there of what I was looking for and what they were looking for.
In that inherently is a component of a deal structure. So you rolled over value
Mhm.
into this investment that they're building. Had you invested in as an individual or previously into private equity as an LP? Have you done it in the past, or did you have to learn that as it was being offered?
I couldn't even spell private equity. I didn't even know what private equity was. Had no experience whatsoever about it. You know, everybody has like the 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 negative side of private equity. It's like, oh my God, private equity is coming in there. And so you know, I knew nothing about it. But I showed up just being very curious. And so now I'm kind of excited because I'm learning like this whole new world. You know, since we've acquired my company, we've acquired four more in under a year. And so now the valuation collectively of all six companies, I think now we're like north of 100 million top line with about 23 million in EBITDA. And so it's just fun to kind of see like what we're building
Yeah.
together. And so I certainly have some influence because I've been in the space, the SEO space, as well as the legal space for so long that I am making introductions to people that might not have taken meetings. And so I'm certainly trying to kind of add value that way too.
What about the way you structured your deal that you would advise another founder who's being approached by private equity or buyers? What worked for you and may not work for other people and how you structured it?
So for me, you know, again, we could have waited another year to see how well we were doing and if we were actually on track to hit what we believed were our EBITDA goals in
Got it.
2025, right?
So that would be a target valuation. So you have a goal of an EBITDA.
Yep,
You know that there's a certain multiple treatment on that EBITDA. What were you using internally as the measure for that? So, I mean, you had stated close to 10 million of EBITDA was your target.
yep.
You
We
were
just knew,
optimizing.
like, we knew forecast that, and we were pretty close, like each year of where we would be based on EBITDA. And so we knew at the end of 2025, you know, we would probably be close to like a $7 million EBITDA. You
And
know,
what were you using to then infer the valuation? Because since you didn't do a sell process, were you just using market comps and saying 7 million of EBITDA can trade for 10x? Like, what were you using
yeah, we were
as
using
your
kind of like a
benchmarks?
range, you know what I mean? Like we were using like a range of anywhere from 6 to 10, you know what I mean? Like we didn't know where we would land. And so that's kind of what we were thinking. And so the way in which we structured our deal was, you know, rather than wait another year, and this is, we didn't come up with this, like the private equity group came up with it. Like rather
Yes.
than wait another year, what if we were to basically put something in place so that you get cash up front, you roll some over, and then you have an earnout period, right? And I didn't even know what an earnout period was, right? You know what I mean? That was new terminology for me, you know? And so I'm like, well, what does that mean? We're like, okay, well, if you say that you can actually get to this EBITDA number, we can put that into the deal, right? And if you do hit that number, then you will get paid on that, but you have to hit that number, you know? And then we're like, but what if we just come a little short, you know? And they're like, okay, well, we can kind of structure it in tiers, you know what I mean? And so like it just kind of made sense. So then it kind of made me more excited to move forward now rather than wait the year and prove it, you know what I mean? So you can
Yeah.
actually structure a deal where you actually get compensated based on what you think you're going to project, you know? And so that was something that I structured.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Whenever people say, "I'll sell when someone offers me a price I'll take for it," right?
Mhm.
Or if I sold now, we're headed in this great trajectory. If we're going to make more, why
Mm.
would I sell now? There's a deal structure that addresses all of those concerns.
There is. I didn't realize that, but there is. And a lot of people, like, that's the mentality. Like, if I'd sell now, I'd be selling myself short because I know in 2 years I'm going to be here, or in 3 years I'm going to be here. I had that same mindset, right? I'm like, I said, no, thanks. Right. And then they came back and, and they're smart people. And this is not their first rodeo. They've done this before, right? They've heard my rebuttal, right? And they've got a solution to my rebuttal, right?
Yeah, it's a standard objection they have a playbook for.
They totally do.
Let's just unpack one hot topic, which was that you had the benefit of not being integrated. You were a standalone asset,
Mhm.
and Herringbone had an expectation of buying similar businesses in
Yep.
verticals, but nothing that required back office integration, no transition. So, given that, what did due diligence look like?
Um, so diligence looked like, for one, they did a background check on me, right? I think that was like one of the first things that they did. Then they brought in a, consultant that, surveyed and spoke with some of our clients, right? Just to kind of get an understanding of like, are we buying a business that actually they say they have a good reputation, but do they really have a good reputation, right? So they did that. They did tax diligence, right? Just to make sure that we didn't owe $10 million to the IRS because we didn't file correctly, like stuff like that. Obviously, they did a complete financial audit, making sure that all of our books were properly aligned. And the beauty is I have a CFO that's like best in class and shows she was well prepared for that. A lot of times agency owners are not ready for that. And so I would recommend that, if and when you do look at potentially selling your business, bring in like a third party company to come in and like audit your books internally so that you can get it up to speed. So you actually can present real data and have a good understanding of what you have versus
Yeah.
what they're looking for, I guess. And then from there, what else? And then obviously all the legal diligence. They use like one of the best law firms in the country, versus like my one lady that like did a great job, I think. I remember getting on a call and it was just me and like 30 lawyers, and they're just like billing in 6-minute increments. Like, let's talk about this. Let's talk about, right. And then they would just drop off. It was definitely a stressful because I'm still running my business too, right? But I'm also going through diligence. And so I was working 2 jobs. I think my running my business was my part-time job. Diligence was my full-time job. Yeah, for that period of time.
At any point, did you worry that the deal would fall apart, or like, how did you keep your optimism?
You always, you always expect it's going to, right? But I knew what we had. I mean, like, we've built a agency that grew every year. And so, we had a nice asset and I knew that what they were buying was exactly what we presented as. And so who knows, like maybe the quality of earnings came in a little bit light, like, like stuff like that. Like, I just knew that if the terms, didn't meet what we discussed in the LOI, like I might reconsider, right? If the quality of earnings came in a little bit lower or whatever, for whatever reason, they didn't accept certain ad backs or whatever else, like there might be a chance that I say like, hey, listen, like this isn't really what I had expected, let's revisit this. So
Yeah. Well, you're currently an investor,
Mhm.
board member, looking to buy. Given that you had no private equity experience prior to selling into private equity, now you're a part of private equity.
Yeah.
What are you looking in the marketplace? What are you excited about, and what kind of acquisitions are of interest?
Yeah, I like to say like we really have something special with this because we could be very selective in who we want to buy. And so as I mentioned earlier, I'm actually going out and introducing our merger and acquisition team to very specific people that I know that are in the industry that I would love to be wearing the same jersey as, right? And so we went to a conference and I'm walking through with the merger and acquisition guy, and we're just kind of like, here, you need to meet this person, you need to meet this person, right? And I guess I've got a pretty good reputation in the market. And so people take that a little bit more seriously than just a cold, unsolicited email, right? If I'm introducing them, right? So that's the beauty is like I have the opportunity to potentially bring on people that I have a great deal of respect for that have built businesses that I think could add value. And so we've been doing that. But then also like I remember we had a meeting where it was the CFO, our COO of Herringbone Digital, right, which is the agency that owns, I guess, Hennessy Digital, if you will. And I remember we were just in Nashville, and it was my CTO, my CFO, my COO, me, and a group of like 6 people. And they started to like pull up spreadsheets and looking at forecasts, and I had all these super smart people in one room, right? And I just like, can we just stop for a second? I'm like, I just want to remind myself that this started from a Toluca Lake coffee shop 10 years ago when I was just trying to get my first client. And now I've got all these super smart people that are looking at ways to kind of build efficiency and, and better performance for our clients. And it's just like, wow, right? So it's really great that now I have like the luxury and benefit of like people that are really smart that got very expensive degrees to come in and that can take the business to the next level.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, you weren't going to go from
Mm.
your, 7 million, 6 million, 7 million of EBITDA to 30 million of EBITDA in 1 year on your own.
No.
And then the people who potentially buy from private equity 30, 50 million of EBITDA, take it to 100, 150 EBITDA. I
Hmm.
mean, we're just talking about levels of the professional game that most entrepreneurs haven't seen before. And you get a, front row seat, Jason. So
Yeah, I love that. I'm all about learning and knowledge and leveling up. And so yeah, I'm excited to just participate and watch how this is all done. Yeah.
if someone's listening to this and they hear, "Ooh, I might want to join Jason's team, wear his colors," what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, my personal email is just Jason at Hennessy, my last name, HENNESSEY.com. I think that's probably the quickest way, but definitely connect with me on LinkedIn for sure. I'd love to learn about you and your business. And if you are looking to potentially sell, again, we're in 4 verticals right now. So dental, and that's everything like orthodontics, like everything dental, legal, not just agency, right? I don't know if you've got a call center that works with lawyers, or if you have a chat service or an AI service, we'd love to talk with you. Home services, and then elective medicine. Those are the 4 verticals that we're focused on.
Wonderful. Jason, thank you for being so forthcoming and being a resource to the industry and other founders who've been on the same journey that you've been on.
Yeah, I'm honored, man. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate the conversation.
If you like this episode, probably like one of our other episodes. Click here.